Utpatti Prakarana, The Origin, Chapter 10, The Story of Lavana, Part 2. The sun is at the concluding lap of his westward journey. The Pir Panjal mountain ridge forms a formidable wall, a curtain where the sun withdraws as he finishes his act. After a hectic activity of the day, so necessary for survival, all beings are moving for a much needed period of rest. As if to help them, slowly, a soothing blanket of darkness gets covered over the existence from the eastern horizon. Though the blanket has in it the tiny twinkling wonders to give pretense of light, the valley starts merging in the darkness. The mind, so far busy in absorbing the beauty all around, starts losing the motivation to seek outside, stops for a while, and begins its inward journey. One can learn and experience many subtle things by just being attuned to the nature. This harmonic relationship of nature with everything else has been called as rhythm. The word rhythm in English is from the same root. The capacity to flow in both outward and inward directions is what differentiates human beings from other beings. Extrovertishness is natural and constitutes most of our actions, while introvertishness is not. This turning of one's attention from the outside to oneself is the main feature of spirituality. Spirituality has been called as Adhyatma Vidya, the science of one's own self. Unfortunately, most of us are aware only of the outer and are ignorant, sometimes totally, of this inner direction. So, religion and spirituality for most of us is a means for leading a moral and ethical life, and at the most, we take it to be a means for the improvement of the life after death. Generally, it is believed that the right time to start thinking of religion and spirituality is the old age, after fulfilling all the responsibility one has either acquired coincidentally or has forced upon oneself. We are of the impression that one has retired from the active life, a very sophisticated way of naming involvement and indulgence. One can easily direct the mind to things spiritual, while the fact is mostly otherwise. For if we do not train our mind to come out of the beaten track of fight for survival and also propagation of species at an early age, the mind refuses to leave the track. Sri Ramakrishna makes the following observation about such people. The bound souls are tied to the world by the fetters of woman and gold. They are bound hand and foot, thinking that woman and gold will make them happy and give them security. They do not realize that it will lead them to annihilation. When a man thus bound to the world is about to die, he asks his wife, "You are about to go." His wife asks, "You are about to go. What have you done for me?" Again, such is the attachment to the things of the world that when he sees the lamp burning brightly, he says, "Dim the light. Too much of oil is being used." And he is on his deathbed. The bound souls never think of God. If they get any leisure, they indulge in idle gossip and foolish talk or engage in fruitless work. If you ask them the reason, he answers, "Oh, I cannot keep still, so I am making a hedge." When time hangs heavy on their hands, they perhaps start playing cards. Unless one is aware of the direction of one's life, it becomes only an involvement in trivia. Adi Shankaracharya opines in his Viveka Chudamani, "Durlabham trayame vaitat devanugraha hetukam Manushyatvam, Mumukshatvam, Mahapurusha Samshrayah. Three things are rare indeed: human birth, burning desire for liberation, and the capacity to surrender to a man of wisdom, and wherever they are found are due to Lord's grace. If we take it to be only a struggle for survival and propagation of species, there is no difference between man and other creatures. It is possible that the other creatures are better, for at least they do not disturb the ecological balance. Man has become extremely cruel, selfish, and so greedy that he has brought the world to the brink of self-destruction. Howard Lovecraft, an American author, observes, "This earth of ours is ailing, and the disease is mankind." But in spite of the prevailing situation or the population explosion, human birth is rare. A short story which had appeared in Chandamama, the magazine for the children young and old, illustrates this point. There lived a giant in a forest, but he was the only surviving giant inhabiting the earth. Not having any company, he was fed up of life and wanted to commit suicide. He tried jumping off the cliff only to crush the ground beneath. No amount of poison worked on him. The water could not drown him. Nothing worked. Unable to know the next course of his action, he started roaming about aimlessly. In a forest, he saw a sage sitting under a tree and was attracted to him. Soon as he came near, he experienced a peculiar peace. Sitting near, he waited for the venerable man to come out of his meditation. When the sage opened his eyes, he beheld a strange creature sitting in front of him. Noticing the sadness on the giant's face, he inquired the cause of his sadness. When the giant explained, the rishi smilingly said that he would try to solve the problem. Whispering a mantra in the giant's ear, he said that with the help of this mantra, he could adopt any form, then whispered another mantra which would bring him back to the original form. The rishi asked him to try assuming different forms for a month and take a final decision about the form which would be permanent. The giant took a human form and started roaming about. In a village, he found a huge crowd listening to a man boasting about his adventures. Having finished the entertainment, the crowd dispersed after a while. The giant, who was in a normal form, asked the man whether he had come across any giants. The man replied in the affirmative and boasted again about it. But when the giant took his real form, the man started shivering and begged for mercy. The giant only remarked that the man's courage was only verbal and not at all real. When he entered another town, he heard that a rich man was in search of an eligible young man for his daughter. The giant took the form of a handsome youth and approached the rich man. The man made inquiries and said that he loved his daughter more than his own life, to which the giant assumed his real form and threatened the man that if he did not give the daughter to him, he would. The rich man didn't even allow him to finish, as he readily agreed so long as he was spared. Again the giant only pitied the man and remarked sarcastically that his love was limited to his own life and left. Finally, he came across a house in which a large group of devotees were engaged in singing devotional songs. Whole night it went on, and the giant came to know that it was organized by a holy man in ochre clothes, sitting on a deer skin in a corner, totally lost in ecstasy. Early next morning, when all the devotees had left, he approached the holy man. He asked the man as to why he was always in prayer. The man said that God was his very life, without whom he could not possibly live. When the giant asked him what would his reaction be if a giant attacked him, with all the poise he could exhibit, the man said he was not worried, as God would surely look after him. As usual, when the giant took his infamous form, the man forgot all devotion, surrender, and his poise, and started shivering and appealing for mercy. The giant commented that even the devotion was only at the superficial level in man. Almost in disgust, the giant returned to the sage, who was as usual in deep meditation. The very sight of him made the giant forget all the bitterness towards human beings. He calmly waited for the Muni to come out of his meditation. When he came to, the Muni inquired about his experiences. As the giant narrated all his disappointing experiences, the Rishi wanted to know whether he had decided about the form he would like to take permanently. Unhesitatingly, the giant said that he wanted to become a human being. When asked as to why he chose it, although he had bitter experiences, the giant said that in spite of all the unpleasant encounters with men whose nature seemed to be mostly hypocritical, mean, and selfish, he felt that they have the capacity to raise themselves to rishihood, and he wanted to become a rishi. Human birth is rare and invaluable due to the total freedom to make use or misuse or abuse the opportunity to evolve. The other creatures have no choice but to evolve in a definite manner. And the main difference between human beings and the other creatures is the awareness and the lack of it. Man, in the initial stages, is very near to the animals because he mostly acts at the instinctive level, goaded by the basic urges and hungers. At this level, there is practically no difference between him and the other animals. But with the development of intellect and subsequently intuition, he starts evolving into a human being and to grow towards superhumanhood. In this sarga, sage Vasishta describes this evolution through stages or the jnana bhumikas, which are also in septenary classification. Shubhecha, or a feeling of discontent in ordinary life and an attraction for finding out the esoteric meaning to life, is the first stage. Vicharana, the inquiry into it through discussion and contemplation, is the second. The third is Tanumanasi, the melting of the extrovertishness of the mind. Sattvapatti is the fourth, when the mind gets the ability to enter within. Asamsakti is the fifth stage, when the sankalpas have become thin. From the practice of these 5 steps, the thought on inner as well as outer objects ceases, and one starts deriving delight in one's own self. This is when one enters Padartha Bhavana, the 6th stage, and the 7th stage is Turya, when one merges with the reality. Only the first 5 stages are within the realm of effort of the seeker, while the other 2 are really the stages that she or he enters without any effort after stabilizing in the earlier stages. Tattvajnana is a release from the fluctuations and resulting upheavals of mind. Such a release alone leads one to moksha. Before this, one has to understand the nature of one's mental involvement and the sense indulgence. One starts getting involved with the world positively by raga or the sense attraction towards objects, and negatively by dvesha or aversion. Both raga and dvesha originate in the bheda vasana, or the tendency for differentiation and multiplicity. The indulgence with the objects starts with bhoga vasana, the tendency to experience. With this understanding, not only intellectual but experiential, the connection between the self and the world becomes fluid, and one is able to recognize and appreciate the freedom that already exists. In other words, one is able to have mastery over one's mind and senses, which are really our slaves, but due to our dependency over them, we have become their slaves. Through this dependency though this dependency is an obstinate habit, we can be weaned away from it with effort and perseverance. That is why the scriptures like Vasishta declare that the avidya or ignorance, which is nothing but the involvement and indulgence with the world, as unreal, because it is only a temporary habit of involvement with the temporal world. Dreaming is temporary, and one need not continue to dream eternally, though most of us require a nightmare to wake up. It must be remembered that it is not mandatory for everyone to realize one's folly and come out of it. Man is perfectly free not to and to continue to get afflicted by the ups and downs of life. Our notions originate in the granthi, or the causal knot of sankalpa, or the conception of thought with I-ness, and culminate in the identification with the world and its objects. But when one finally realizes that there is some other dimension to life than mere survival, one commences his pilgrimage. The march of the individual from the deluded state to the enlightenment state consists of above-mentioned stages of jnana. The journey necessarily begins with the gross and proceeds to subtler and culminates in the subtlest. When one starts experiencing discomfort with the fluctuations of mind, one is in search of the method to calm these fluctuations. Yoga Vasishta gives a very comprehensive definition of yoga. Manah prashamanopaya yoga ityabhidhiyate. The technique of calming down the mind is called yoga. Continuing, sage gave the cause for the continual affliction of the human beings to be the wonderful Maya, and to make it more interesting, he reverted to the story of King Lavana. After waking up from the hypnotic state induced by Siddha Shambharika, he remembered the places he had experienced in the state. To test the validity of his experience, Lavana wanted to see whether such places really exist. With his retinue, he started going around the kingdom and covered the 3 directions. Finally, in the north, the 4th direction, he came across the forest he had passed and suffered. And then he reached the town where he had lived as an outcast. To his surprise, the king came across all those things and people associated with that life. The old mother of his late wife and the other people who had survived the great famine were still there. The lamenting old woman narrated the story of her daughter who had chosen a king for her husband and borne him children. The king instructed his minister to relieve the poor people of their distress and conduct them to his kingdom. Reflecting over the situation again and again, he requested his preceptor to initiate him into the mysteries of the Atman and attained quiescence through sincere effort. Rama, who represents all seekers, asked a question. How was it that the things felt in the regions of the perturbed mind objectified themselves in the physical plane? With infinite patience, the great sage replied that it would become clear when he would narrate the story of Gadhi in Upashama Prakarana. For the present, it was enough to understand that the powerful Maya is capable of creating heterogeneous objects, and also that it is only a very great coincidence whereon the vasanas of the mind coincide with that of the world of objects. King Lavana took the illusion created by Shambharika to be true. The Chandalas living on the slopes of the Vindhyas mistook this illusion in the mind of Lavana to be real through their own mind. That which dawned on the mind of Lavana as Jagrata Swapna was reflected on the Chandalas as Jagrata and vice versa. This is because the individual mind stuff as such is a part of the universal mind. Hence, every mind is connected with every other mind. And through a great and inexplicable coincidence that they get connected to one another. Play of Maya is such that it is beyond all imagination, and its prowess can be overcome by only jnana. All these things can be comprehended only when the mental activity ceases, so as to give us the separateness with the activity, be it the I-ness or the memory or intellect or manas. This brings us to the conclusion of Utpatti Prakarana, which stresses mainly one point repeatedly, that the world of objects is the manifestation of the initial sankalpa, the conception of thought, giving way to the vikalpa or the intensification of the thought through the manifestation of mental activity. The three planes of manifestation, Jnanakasha, Chidakasha and Bhutakasha, are being described to help the seeker to understand the order of subtlety. Jnanakasha is the pre-sankalpa state, and in this state, one is in total control of activity as well as quiescence. In Chidakasha, the activity is already started with I-ness, and there is every likelihood of involvement with the mental manifestations. Therefore, the quiescence at this state requires a little effort, and in Bhutakasha, the manifestation has become gross, and the involvement as well as the indulgence has started and demands paurusha or will and prayatna or sustained effort. The external and the internal have a very strong connection. That is why a seeker unable to discount the external milieu tries to search such places where she or he will have least disturbance. In this sense, many a time it seems that seekers are trying to escape from their responsibilities. Many succeed in getting such a milieu, but most have to be content with whatever comes to their lot circumstantially. At such times, Mother Nature comes to their rescue. The dusk and dawn, experienced every day, help one to achieve the antarmukhata, a mandatory prerequisite for understanding oneself. That is why these periods of the day are being called as sandhyas, the juncture, especially the night and day at dawn, and day and night at dusk or twilight, were considered to be very helpful for contemplation. The practice called Sandhyavandanam or prayers at twilight is performed at these times of the day. With the antarmukhata, one begins to recognize the inner mechanism of the being as described in the stories of the scripture, giving very valuable hints for all sincere seekers.